Okay, I guess it did kick us out, and now they want us to start paying, so they're not happy with us. So we're gonna wait for our folks to jump back on. Okay, we're all jumping back on. Great. Everyone knows to come back on. This is awesome. Okay. Alex, could you turn your
Yeah.
phone around so, or the recording device around so we could see you bigger on the screen?
Oh, am I small?
Yeah. There you go. Much better. Thank you. Where do we have Natasha coming back on? I hope we do, because I know she was. Oh, there she is. I'm gonna mute everyone, and I'm just gonna allow Topacio to continue speaking now. Go ahead, Topacio. You're on.
Yes, I was walking with my daughter, and there was a car that passed by with a Confederate flag, and it just freaked me out. It just freaked me out. Whether the person is, I don't know what beliefs they have, but it's just scary. It's really scary. And as positive as I want to be and optimistic, I just wish that people who were white would have certain conversations with with others that are white about, certain things, because, maybe those are conversations that we can have as people of color. It's just getting to that point where
Right.
it's scary. It's scary.
Right. Right. No, agreed. Agreed. I think that's, so that kind of leads into a little bit of the other point that I wanted to make tonight. One thing that, and I'm sure, I don't think many of you may know this, or you may call it by another name, but for us, when I say us, I mean therapists, when I'm doing work with others who have experienced trauma, I did learn throughout my career that there is such a thing called vicarious trauma, meaning any of us who are actually counseling folks who've experienced deep traumas, we're hearing these stories, we're living this experience with these folks. And one thing we finally figured out is, why am I crying all the time? Why am I emotional? Why am I having these intense feelings? And it's because we realize that we're kind of living through and feeling that trauma through our patients and through our clients. But it's not only exclusive to us that experience happens. And so when we see the video, when we see pictures online, when we see footage or anything of people getting hurt, dragged, pulled, beat, we experience vicarious trauma as well. Because no matter what, it's personal for us. So it doesn't have to be my child in order for me to feel like, okay, this is impacting me. We all collectively as a Black community experience vicarious trauma. And not just from what we're seeing, but from what we've inherited over hundreds and hundreds of years. And so for us, this is like hundreds of years in the making of us feeling like we can't trust, feeling like we're persecuted. And when we see those confirmations in the media, it kind of adds to that. So that speaks a lot to what Topacio was saying. When people want to share stories with us, it's almost it almost feels like you're trying to tell me something that honestly I already know. This is an experience I already know. You need to be telling other folks who don't believe that any of this is true. Because most of the time when we're trying to have these conversations, all we hear is, oh, it's just this case, or oh, it's in our heads. And no matter how many stories have come out, you would be surprised. Maybe you surround yourself with a little bit more of an elevated level of folks who see what's going on in the world. But I encounter all walks of life. And some of these folks I actually have to counsel. And they have those ideas that this is all fake. It's all imaginary. It's not really the way we're seeing it. And so we're all collectively getting gaslit on a daily basis. And it's painful, and it's harsh, and it's challenging. And so I hear you, Topacio. That's exactly what I'm feeling. And I'm curious too, how you folks experience that vicarious trauma as well, similar to me. Because I know the rare times that I've seen an image, I break down or I get angry, and literally I lash out at the next person I encounter it's just how I work.
But do you think there's a difference, Alex, between like how we experience vicarious trauma and other Black folks experience trauma? I know that when we talked about this, we talked about why, for example, in the therapy world, you all use support groups, right? To ensure that people who experience the same trauma can come together and talk about it. Why is it that my vicarious trauma of this situation is not the same as your vicarious trauma?
Very good point and great question. The difference is huge here because for us, we literally are seeing ourselves. Think about all the many years that we've never even seen an image of a Black person for once at all. And then when we finally started seeing images, they were caricatures, they were pantomiming, they were basically jokes or extremely violent, viewed as like primitive almost even. They just had all these images of how we supposedly look. And so we've never had very many positive images in our lives. So for us, the vicarious trauma is very different because it's almost as if we're seeing ourselves getting assaulted or killed right then and there. It is different. It's a very, very different image because like I said earlier, it is automatically personal for us when we see a Black person die. It does not matter if we know them, if they're in our family, it is automatically personal for us because those are not the images. We don't ever get to see positive, amazing images. And because we also know this is a collective struggle for all of us, it also gives us the reality because when we experience trauma, people tend to end up being really hypervigilant and are always worried about their surroundings and looking around. So for us, that heightens that awareness for us because we know that it could be us tomorrow. Similar to an experience for me, I mean, I've shared this in the past, you know, we all have heard and seen many stories of Black folk getting, you know, pulled over and their experience. And I've always been fearful of that. That only got worse the day I actually did get pulled over for a random traffic stop by 2 police cars. Don't ask me why I needed to have 2 pull me over for an expired tag, which wasn't technically expired. That was a terrifying day for me. It was the middle of the day, road was fully crowded, but because of what I see and because of what I know, I knew that no matter what, this exchange could still end up bad for me no matter what I do. And as non-Black folk, I don't think you'll live that same experience as we do.
And what's funny is that even I, as a brown person with a dark-skinned son, I experienced it in a process, right? Like initially, I was like, my question was what every other non-Black person who hasn't done debiasing work thought, which is, what did they do to deserve to get stopped or to get hurt, right? So then my reaction in talking to my son was never, be careful, like, don't escalate the situation. My conversations with him were, don't act out. Why do you wear those jeans sagging like that? Like, why do you get a fade? Like, you know, you can look whiter. Why aren't you I would say these things thinking, you know, what was I doing? I was victim blaming. And I wasn't centering who the perpetrators really were and what the problem really is, which is white supremacy and racism. Somebody said recently in a meme, they said, stop saying that he was killed because he was Black and start saying that he was killed because these 2 men were racists. Yes. We need to change and shift the narrative and give the responsibility where the responsibility lies. And as accomplices, we need to take responsibility also for the way that we hear things and we feel things and process things. And even if you're, you know, whether we're Jewish or Latinx, whether we're women, whatever it is that we are, that gives us some insight into what it means to be oppressed, we don't know what it's like to walk around with dark skin. So we have got to stop thinking that we do, because we really, really don't.
Right. And I like that nuance. I think it's so important to highlight that, because in that meme, it did say, because it ends up showing Black as a deficit.
Right.
Like he was killed because he was
That's
Black.
the problem.
That is the problem. And if we start putting the onus where it belongs, maybe we can start shifting that narrative, which will shift responsibility on who's to change that. And in that same token, the other things I was talking about are, again, in that vicarious trauma realm, I want you to also understand, this goes back to what Topacio said earlier, is that kind of go talk to your own people. we have to also heal together and apart. When I say this, I mean in the sense that there are things that we all can do collectively as a community, as we've seen eons of folks doing side by side, trying to battle this oppression, this white supremacy, correct? But we also have to heal apart. I cannot share in this experience with Mavi. We've had some conversations, but many of them have been around how we're going to have this conversation today. If you ask her, she will tell you, we haven't actually gotten down and talked about what's really happened. And it probably won't happen because I need to heal with my people. I need to heal on my own with people who are going to be able to understand without me really having to share words or say anything. And why I bring that up today is because I want our accomplices to understand that this is okay and it's needed. It's our own version of a support group, except we're a whole community in that way. And when we start having to cater to fragility of feeling left out of that group, it is another way that our experience gets shut out and the space for that gets blocked. So I think it's really important for y'all to understand, if you bring it up and you get like a short response like, yeah, I know it's sad, and nothing else, please leave it alone. Because that probably means this person does not want to share this experience with you, and that it is okay.
And so what is the way, because I think that you and I are, kind of like a unique situation where we do this work. So when I jump into this conversation, it could kind of live in the little re-envision harmony bubble, right? And so I don't really have that with any other Black people in my life. So I've had a challenge with, how do I bring this up? Like, I know I want to do something. I know I want to like hold space. And I do put very vague things on Facebook. Like, I'm holding space, my inbox is open, but sometimes I feel like that's not enough. Like, how can I really let the Black people in my life know that if they do want to talk about it or send me to do something or send me into action, like, how do I do that? So what advice do you have for us as accomplices in that regard?
So, I mean, the first thing is, one, this is a topic that's happening in the community, so in the whole world. So everybody knows it. So we're not telling you that you're not able to bring it up or talk about it. In person, face to face, I would say it's important to say, hey, I hear a lot of stuff that's going on right now. I know about Ahmaud, Brianna. If you ever want to open up and talk about it, I'm here. But I understand that I may not be the person you want to talk to about it. But I am here if you want that. Offer that space, but just leave it at that. I would never ask questions, impose on any of your folks or anything like that. But offer that space, and if they're comfortable enough with you, they can share. If not, please don't take it personal. Because in that reaction, that reaffirms our feeling already, and you become even less safe to us. So that's the other piece. Like, it's not even just the oops, that ouch moment that you give us where we feel like, ugh. But then when we call you on it or we check you on something and then you bring it, you become frustrated by that. That just breaks the connection that we have even further. And typically those are the behaviors that make us less and less trustworthy of some of our, I'm going to say allies in this realm, where we feel like those folks are not as safe for that reason.
And I think it's important to bring up for those on this call who don't know your relationship with me. Like, Alex is like my sister. She helps me raise my son. She's the only person allowed in my house when my husband is here because he's not really a social person. So like, if there's somebody close to me in my life, it's Alex. So know that even if like as tight as me and her are, we sing together, we work together, we're friends together, we talk about literally everything. I mean, she knows my whole life. I'm an open book to Alex, and I feel like sometimes I am, she is to me too, but I know my limit because I am never going to fail to see the fact that there is a difference in perspective and how we take on the world, even how we take on this work. So, I really think that it's important to recognize that even if we're married to somebody who's Black, or if our child is Black, our proximity to Blackness doesn't make us Black, and doesn't necessarily mean that we can invade that space. So I'm glad you kind of reiterated that, because you're right. Like, since we do this work, we do unpack a lot of stuff, but it is always in the context of this work. I don't really think it ever happens outside of that. And we need to learn to be okay with that and not be fragile about that, because saviorism, and I'm going to read something at the end of this call about saviorism, but saviorism gives us such a high that we want to feel like we're doing something, because we do get frustrated at what we see and about, you know, about racism, and we want to do something, especially if you're doing any of this work. So when we feel that helplessness makes us feel like emotionally constipated, I say, and then we want to move into spaces that are on our own. So I'm so glad you said that, because you know, it actually even opens up my eyes to our relationship. And that's, it's important to know, hey, doesn't matter how close you are to somebody. Doesn't mean that we're skin folk. We're not.
No.
We're friends.
And it's understandable, right? When you love someone, when you care for someone, you want to feel like you're there for them. You want to have a reciprocal relationship. But there's just so many different ways you can be there for people. And especially in times of crisis, times of, you know, tragedy, everyone reacts and responds so differently. And I think I got a glimpse, I think, of what Topacio said, but it's you've got to sometimes just let people come to you, because a lot of times, and for me personally, this is what I see with more so with white friends than anything else. We are actually constantly bombarded by y'all. And I say that in the sense of, even in posts, responses tend to be paragraphs long. So that's another way of like taking up space, right?
Yes.
I've had so many posts or interactions that I just cut off, either by turning off my phone or saying I've got to go, because even that is taking so much emotional space for me. And so we already kind of live in the space where many of you take up space already. And so I don't feel like I have that space much of the time. So if you can do something as simple as literally allowing that space by responding with one sentence or less to something, unless prompted, that could make a world of difference for someone who's trying to really share their experience with you, because it's really like cutting your gut open and exposing yourself when we talk about these things. And for a long time, I didn't think that about myself. I just thought I'm always an open person. But it's different to be vulnerable versus just being open about vulnerable topics. There's a difference in that.
Wow.
And many of us might just be open with vulnerable conversation, but not fully vulnerable with you.
And that's true, because again, we use our relationship a lot to give examples. I've known you for years, but when we first met, we had very deep conversations about very intimate, private things. But when it got to race, you immediately like built up a wall. And when I talked to you about doing this work with me, you're like, whoa, why? You want me to be the face for the race? And so, you know, there's always that line that we have to be so cautious of crossing. So you're right. That's awesome that you share that. And we talk, and I just want to really quickly highlight some of the things that you've mentioned that people might not know the terminology. So I want them to go back and Google it. Centering, holding space. Those two are very, very important. Taking up space. We often talk about taking up emotional space and what that means. Please look it up, because it is so important to learn that in the world, because of our privilege, when we enter anything, whether it's a social media space, a physical space, in a relationship, wherever we are, we already have like more space given and granted to us because of whatever privilege we hold, right? So like light skin privilege, you know, whether we have money privilege, whether we have education privilege, whatever privilege we have, all of that builds up to where we're just given space, right? And everybody else has to claw for whatever space is left over. So then we often have to really be cognizant of that. Like Alex and I talk about step up, step back. Like she has to push herself to step up, and all the time, and I have to shut up, right? Because I don't know how to do that. So it's about learning how to do that for each other, and knowing how much space you're taking up when you do certain things, and being teachable and being able to take those words when they're told to you. So when somebody tells you you're taking up space, lanes, can you talk a little bit about lane stepping and staying in your lane as an accomplice? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think we haven't talked on it, but you're awesome at talking about this.
Yes. So lane stepping, for those who don't know, lane stepping kind of involves when we're talking about different topics, and even though the issues probably cross different intersections, the main centered person in that story could be could be a Black person, it could be a woman, it could be so many different things. But typically, a lot of times, what may happen when you're lane stepping is, for instance, I'm just going to throw this out here because that's just what came to my mind, the Cosby scandal, right? That was a very tough lane for people to figure out where they wanted to be, because obviously he took advantage of many women and violated many women. And so on a woman level, I was angered. But to see some of the conversations, the names, the things that were being shared about him, as much as that was, they were very accurate, I don't think people understood why that was such a lane step for me, for a white person to talk about how horrible Cosby is, because for a long time, this man was the only Black man I saw on television. He was like a second dad to me. And so for many in the community, we were conflicted because we were angry, but seeing that anger happen with someone we know. And for those who've had some terrible traumas happen within their family, that's what's happening to that person who's been victimized in a family. That's how it feels for us when something happens to a member of our community and everybody just goes in. Everybody goes in. Everybody's berating and just tearing them down, when there are many other folks in other backgrounds and communities and cultures who are doing similar heinous acts, who you all can collect, right? Harvey Weinstein, I leave him to y'all. Like, you definitely take care of that. I have my own. I don't need to take care of that, right? Please, I want Cortez, say that, please, say that.
So I was just typing in the chat because I'm like, you have just hit the nail on the head. White folks have been raping, abusing, molesting, like, before the beginning of time. I grew up having white friends. I saw it. And so it just behooves me how a Black person does something and all of the just negative, the hunting them down, the whole nine. But y'all ain't got nothing to say about the priests. Y'all ain't got nothing to say about Weinstein. You got nothing to say even about what even happens in your own family. And I'm privy because I grew up with white people. So I know the girls that got impregnated by their fathers and they sent them off somewhere to have the baby and bring the baby back as a child that just popped up, or a niece and nephew. But in advocacy and in dependency and work like that, everybody wants to turn their nose up at the Black woman with 5, 6, 7, 8 kids and no baby daddy. But let's talk about that white girl that, like, so it's so unfair. And then everybody expects us to just smile and be okay with it. And then when we do express it, then we'll just get over it. Slavery's over. And you're like, what the hell does slavery have to do with how you're handling this situation right now today?
Right.
What are you talking about? And it spills over into everything. And no one wants to admit it. No one wants to talk about this pink elephant in the room.
Right.
Because it's our issue and our problem. And we need to get over slavery, and we need to get beyond it, and we need to just be okay with it.
Right.
Man, let me tell you something. There is no okay.
There is no.
What is going on right about now?
Right. I agree. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I want to be clear, like, we understand that there's folks that do raise up and talk about it. But I promise you, the amount of fire that comes under for Black folk who do wrong in the media, they get top billing for those storylines for sure. They are just totally number one. And we see that. So we're not saying this from a perspective of this is how we feel. We're saying it because that is what we see every day. And I've been around this planet for a long time. And even as a child, I understood that and made statements that I can remember of like, why is this always happening to us? That's a statement that me at 11 years old would say. So children as young as school age know this and feel this. And that's why we have to be having conversations. Our conversations with our children have to be very, very, very different than anybody else's. We have to really train and talk to our kids about how to be safe when that's not what should be happening. What should be happening is the rest of us taking a sledgehammer to this world and starting over, because it has really gotten off to a bad start. And this is not the way we need to be. So I get that. It's very painful. I hate it. I get really frustrated, but I agree wholeheartedly that others need to show up, and not in a lane stepping kind of way. So for instance, in this particular scenario with Ahmad, what I was telling Mavi is that what made me have to shut off social media was just seeing all the stories. I don't know, for getting likes. You know, I just start to think it's just so you can show you care. I would prefer to see more action statements, action posts from our accomplices. If there's nothing else you do, I think that's what I'd love to see. Because I've shared a lot in the last few weeks. And for those that I know are my true accomplices, they definitely shared when I was putting the petition. I was sharing the petition, everybody was, but I became highly aware of folks that weren't sharing that. And were only sharing the gruesome story, the one with the video in it. Like, this is what I'm asking personally for me of accomplices here in this room, and for anyone else that you know who wants to be a true accomplice. If we're talking about issues of race, at least for us, it's elevated. We know what's going on. With your people, they need to understand it, but they need to understand it from an action and a social justice manner. So, for instance, my idea is that similar to how we put trigger warning when we want to warn people of images they're going to see, I want to erase that whole culture and not have to put anything up that you need to put a trigger warning in the first place. And I want you to post things that you need to put action required at top. Action needed. So that folks can pay attention and not get lost in the wash and sea of Black people who are dying. Because honestly, that's what it's becoming now. And that's my concern. And I know accomplices are going to have questions, but that's my question to you all. Is this becoming now just a blanket, a sea? Are you still able to see these as real people and real stories? And do you think others in your circle who are not as elevated or as where you're at, do you think they are actually seeing these as people?
And I think that we talk about sometimes what some of you might know, but I know a lot of you do, that's considered tragedy porn. And there were some folks online that constantly talk about how, why is it that Black justice is always hinged on Black tragedy and Black death, and you know, the sharing of these violent videos. And you had said to me, Alex, something about how there was justice served and these people were arrested because the Black community saw it, not because it happened or because the video was taken. I don't remember what you said exactly.
Yeah, so there's this meme going out that's saying the arrest didn't happen because they saw the video. The arrest happened because we saw the video. And that is a very important distinction to make. And if you need any proof of that, it took 2 months. And those were the 2 months that it took for everyone to post and elevate the story online and for that video to go around. So unfortunately, something like that probably reinforces others to say, then that's why we have to show the video. Instead of taking a step back and thinking about why did we have to see it though for something to happen if it did exist. This is a systematic issue. It is a systematic, pervasive problem. So it's not about we need to keep showing these videos. It's about we need to start really creating some real action items, which is why I'm mobilizing myself. But I know there's plenty of folks like me who previously didn't know how, are too afraid to, because we already know if we're dying already from doing nothing, imagine if I'm trying to advocate for my own people. I feel like that's a guaranteed death sentence for me. And I want people to realize that. That's why there's many times I'm scared to go to marches. I'm scared to go out there. If this man was able to get killed jogging, if Brianna was able to get killed in her house sleeping, if I'm out there marching against an issue that I know people want to silence, I feel like that's a guaranteed death sentence for me. And so we Black people need your protection, not in a savior way. We need you to be out there fighting those fights when we're too afraid to do that.
And often you tell me that the way to do that is to ensure that you have that, and that's a model that Re-Envision Harmony created. And when you go through our trainings, you learn about the model that we've created, where it's about creating these layers of protection whereby, you know, Black folks can really be at the center of protection. You know, how we can, you know, allow them to lead the space and have us just kind of be their foot soldiers and just kind of letting them lead, not letting them, because really, I mean, just shutting up, taking, you know, sitting down and show the leaders that they already are. Because if you see like the Black community's already taken on the work of sharing the video got out because of the Black community, not because you and I, because they made it happen. And it's a powerful community. All we really need to do is get out of their way and ask, what can I do to help, right? And there was a question for you, kind of along those lines, Alex, from Angela. She's the follower of our page, who's always very kind of engaged with us, and she wanted to unpack this with us today. She said, how do we initiate an action against racist acts? I've acted before, but now I want to know how to initiate.
Okay. All right. So similar to me, you're asking the same question I asked when I first started this. Like, how do I make change? How do I try to get involved? How do I try to make a difference and initiate, like you said, some action against when you see racism? For me, the biggest thing has been to do what most people say they don't want to do, is become political, but not in the huge big picture, but in these little small, what we consider small, but municipal, especially judges. I work with youth who are tied up in the legal system. So I see every day how many go in and for ridiculous, downright stupid reasons that they're in the criminal justice system. And that's because there are judges who are upholding some of these laws, making precedent. And so we have to get involved definitely on that level to decide who's going to be sitting in that seat. The other thing that I think is super important too, there's so many groups and action organizations that are already happening that actually know how to do this stuff, that know how to make bills, that know how to create, calls to action. And that's the beautiful thing. For you who don't know, jump into one of those groups, like Women's March Miami, trying to get involved and become part of that organization that's doing some of the work. Because as an individual, it is challenging to really find a way to make a change. And we don't make changes in a vacuum and individually. There's definitely a ton of different options. Yes, Sue, there's definitely Surge. There's so many other organizations out there that you can make a difference. It's all about really choosing the one that aligns with what you want to support, because there are definitely different ones that are addressing so many of the different inequities and injustices that are happening to the Black community. So it's really all about finding the one that hones in on what you want to address and what you want to deal with, and jumping in there and doing the work with them. And if there's change that needs to happen within that, then we have to go forward and push to make changes within those organizations as well. But that's what our job is. That's why we're trying to work, especially with folks who are in these organizations, to try to help make some change so that even people who are going in trying to do the work are also then not being oppressed or oppressing as well. I hope that answered the question.
And I think that's like someone brings up Martin Luther King and marching with Martin Luther King, and people often, like, you know, white accomplices often want to bring Martin Luther King into the fold. I invite everybody on this call to read his letter from the Birmingham jail. And I'm saying not read it fast and like rush through it, like really take it in and learn about why moderate, positive, well-intentioned, liberal white people are causing more harm to Black and brown people than the KKK, okay? Because the KKK isn't as large as all these moderate white folks who are well-intentioned. So it's important that you recognize the nuance between, you know, just being well-intentioned and doing good things in your community, and really learn how to take a step back and be led by Black people and putting your body in harm's way for Black people. Okay. And if you walk into an organization that says that they're pro-Black, but you don't see any Black people in leadership, question that. If you go into a church that says that's open and affirming, for example, talking about other issues, and they say they're open and affirming LGBTQIA, but there are no gay people in leadership at that church, walk away. That doesn't mean they're really open and affirming. Let the organization show you that they put their money where their mouth is. Now, we only have 3 minutes, but we do want to let you know that these conversations are always happening. Our group, I posted it in the chat. Go ahead and take a look at that. You can ask these questions in there. That's what that group is for. Now that you're part of the RH family, you're free to join. It's a free group where we always have conversations. It's not very active right now, but you all can make that happen. Angela and Robin are two of our most active members in that group, and I appreciate their work in there. But I really think that accomplices do need to do anti-racism and de-biasing work to really be able to understand what it means to be an accomplice. And this little conversation is but a drop in the bucket of everything we have to talk about, and all of the layers of oppression, because, you know, race compounds everything. Gender, socioeconomic level, immigration status. So we really got to talk about all the intersections. And so this is a series. This conversation is a series. Today we're talking about Black women. We will certainly post the event for future, future identities that we will be discussing. But please stay in the conversation. We have the opportunity now. We have the technology now. So it's beautiful to see that there's 17 of us here today. That's great.
Amazing.
Let's keep it going. But I want to take these last 2 minutes to first read something that Alex wanted me to share with you all. I realized today, a white mother of brown children wrote this. I realized today that I feel physically different when I'm being nice. Like my brain realizes different chemicals, and I feel a real high. My vision becomes narrower, my breathing slows, and I have a smile on my face. My body enjoys feeling privileged, nice, holier than thou, and superior. There was a Black Amazon delivery guy, and I waved like way too enthusiastically, and I felt the high come over my body. White people, have you noticed any physical changes like that? Like next time you're being nice, notice in your body. So noticing your body, like what you're doing for the BIPOC community, especially for the Black community, is you're doing it for self-serving reasons to feel good about yourself, or are you really doing it for them? And that is the question we'll leave. And then I just want to thank Alex so much for her time, and I just want to leave the last few seconds to her to say
no problem. I definitely want to end and talk about that too, because I think it's so important to, I always try to normalize things, because I know and understand that everyone's coming from good intentions, and who doesn't want to feel good? We're humans, we live off of endorphins, so that's what we want to do. So whoever shared that was very transparent about the fact that they got those endorphins and those feelings from that. So we're not saying it's not going to happen. The problem is that if that ends up being the only reason you're doing it, then it's not really going to lead you anywhere. And I know many of you folks are not doing it for that reason, but recognize when you do feel in that space, like, okay, let me make sure this is a great angle so I can post it right. No, how about don't post the picture at all? Just post the call to action, post the situation, post the issue, call it a day. And so I want to also elevate what Cortez wrote in the chat too, start with your spheres of influence. Like really